morning. This is the Lou Rockwell Show, and it's an honor to have as our guest today Dr. Ron Paul. Ron is, what do we say about him? I mean, he's of course a longtime congressman, a platform he used to vastly advance the liberty movement, also with his presidential campaigns. A man who is all over the world the leader of the freedom movement. We'll be talking a little bit about his trip to Brazil in a moment. He's president of the the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. He's involved in the Ron Paul homeschool curriculum. If you're homeschooling your children, that's the place to go. He's head of Voices of Liberty, Ron Paul's Voices of Liberty, and he's a board member of the Mises Institute and a longtime, from the very beginning, distinguished counselor of the Institute. So, Ron, I thought we'd start off this morning by talking about, the Islamic State and what's happening there, what seems to be, to me anyway, not only the evil but irrational policy of the U.S. What's happening?
Well, it looks like the old adage about us going about the world looking for monsters to destroy is pretty much true. It looks like we're still doing that. But the whole thing is, if they don't find any, our government seems to be able to create them. And so much of the problems that exist in the Middle East, I see as a consequence. Of course, people like to turn that around and say, you mean they're not guilty of anything? It's all our fault. Well, it's a combination of things. What our policies are doing is eliciting, the violence in that region, which is smoldering anyway, because there's a constant civil war going on over in the Middle East, and especially, amongst the Muslims and the radical Sunnis and the radical Shia. So we go over there and get in the middle of this, and everybody becomes hysterical over it and make so much more of it than if we'd have just followed the advice of those who worried about us going about the world and looking for monsters to destroy. If we would have followed the advice that they gave us then was don't get involved in the entangling alliance. Make friends with those who want honest friendship and have commerce with them and seek peace. But we are so far removed from that. And the propagandists are so effective. This last year has been a bit discouraging because I thought we were making some headways on our position on non-intervention. But now the propagandists have been able to use some of the violence over there and some of the killing, and with the government and the media, they have been able to reverse a lot of that so many people, are ready to go bomb. Of course, I don't think they want to go. These guys that want to do all the bombing, I always want to ask them, do you want to go over and drive one of those trucks and patrol that territory over there? Of course not. They want your kids to do and somebody else's kids to do it, but they never want to. So I see it as an utter consequence and a tragedy of a foreign policy that's deeply flawed, and we're in the midst of a real struggle with presenting our case, where I believe the majority of Americans, when they have a real choice and know what we're talking about, I think they're overwhelmingly for us. Fortunately for us, though, is that in spite of the propaganda, I find that the young people are still with us because they're inheriting this mess, and they see it's a financial cost, but it's also a cost and a threat to our economy here at home.
It's so funny. Of course, everybody's outraged at these beheadings, as they should be. I don't know entirely who's responsible for them, but they are outrageous acts. But nobody seems to care that Saudi Arabia beheads far more people than the Islamic State does, including for such crimes as witchcraft. I mean, they're beheading people for witchcraft. So that's, of course, entirely suppressed, but that's our great ally and funder, and the guy that George Bush kisses his hand and Obama bows down to him and so forth. So their beheading is perfectly okay.
Yeah, and I think during this period of time where the 2 or 3 had been beheaded, I think there might be, 14 or 18 or in Saudi Arabia, and you're right. They don't put that on the news because then we would have to question our alliance and our relationship with Saudi Arabia. But maybe if we ever get to see the final report of 9/11, maybe the American people's opinion would change. And I think that is something we have to continue to work on, because in spite of the handicap of government suppressing all this material, we have some people who are are considered conventional and not part of our group who are advocating release, like those who were on the commission. Those individuals say there's no reason in the world why we can't find out about it. But most people suspect the information that is being kept from us actually deals with Saudi Arabia. And, of course, I blame Roosevelt for all of it. He made the commitment. Every president since then has, met that commitment, whatever you want. So that's the game they play.
I have a friend who was at a very, very high-level investment meeting of CEOs and other important people in New York on 9/11, and they got up to announce what had happened, and they said everybody should stay, but the planes were ready to take the Saudi Arabians back to Saudi Arabia, and they left the meeting. This was a very, very top Wall Street meeting in New York City. So immediately they were being taken out and sent back to Saudi Arabia when nobody else could take a flight. I remember you were trapped. Many other people were trapped. Americans couldn't take flights, but the Saudi princes were just wafted out immediately on a cloud and sent home.
Right. If my memory serves me right, I think it happened on a Tuesday, and by Friday I was still struggling to get out and heard about the Saudis getting out. And it wasn't just Saudis. It was a family with a last name of bin Laden were leaving.
That's right.
So that doesn't,
that's right.
That's no proof of guilt. We know that. But Saudi Arabia, where'd the hijackers come from? And all of a sudden they get to go out. And I think what the report is going to show is they were never quizzed, because that kind of information does leak out when you're in Washington. I think most people knew that not only did they get to leave, but they were not even questioned by our FBI. So that's how efficient, our security is. It provides a lot of security for our enemies.
Ron, you talked about the young people. You were recently a guest of the Mises Institute Brazil in Sao Paulo, and I know met with many, many students. And how do you feel about that trip? What about the kids you met there and the other people, of course?
Well, I didn't know what to expect. I knew that you had been down there and helped get the Mises Institute started down there, and they talked a lot about you. And, the country's still has a long way to go to become a libertarian country. So I thought maybe there'd be a few and there would be some enthusiasm, but it really, really was exciting because I talked to two groups. One, the hardcore Mises group. It was a little bit smaller, but they actually had to pay, to come to this event. And I think there were several hundred, maybe 400, as I recall. And then there was another group, which was more like a Chamber of Commerce group, business group, but mostly young people. And there was a lot more. I can't remember, probably over 1,000. And so the reception was very good. I was also on one of these, the most popular talk show hosts at nighttime, sort of, like we have here. And
like a Jay Leno show or something.
Yeah,
like
sort of
that.
like the Jay Leno show. But to me, I walked in and the audience was there. The faces just looked like I was in America. But I wasn't in America, and I really wasn't in Brazil, but I was among friends who were really involved in something philosophic, not nationalistic. So their reception, everything was very similar. And it is a little tedious listening, to Portuguese in one ear and English in the other ear and keeping up with it. But it seemed to have worked pretty well. But the impression I had was, my goodness, this is just like the college campuses of in the United States. I thought, well, maybe there is some real progress. Of course, we've often talked about, how this message is spreading, and it is international. This past week I had two interesting invitations, and I found them fascinating. I don't think I'll be able to attend either one, but Marie Le Pen sent me a personal note to come and speak before her political party. She had come to see me in Washington before I left, and she wanted to talk about the gold standard. And so, there was a little bit of controversy there, but she was still very eager to talk to me, and she's reached out, and of course I won't be able to do that. But the other one was an individual that actually came to see me in Lake Jackson and followed up with an invitation to go to Switzerland and visit over there and do some PR work for the referendum on gold. And I thought, well, Why would they care about me? I'm not even in Congress. Why do they want me to come over there and talk about, gold in the referendum? I may do more harm than
you're
good.
Dr. Gold. That's why.
But it looks like I won't be able to do that. But it's one that was sort of very, very sympathetic too. It'd be neat to say we participated in something very historic because, if the Swiss turn this around and say they're voting to go in a different direction, they were the last ones out of the gold standard. Maybe they're the first one to nudge us back in that direction. So